Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. She worked behind the spotlight of American Idol, but died in the quietest corner of her home. He was a lifelong musician, and ended up face down in his own bathroom. No forced entry, no alarm. 4 days dead before anyone knocked. What happened inside that $5 million home in Encino? July 14th, 2025, 2:18 p.m. LAPD dispatch logs record a call flagged as a welfare check at a residential property on Grimes Place, Encino. The caller, a family friend, stated neither Robin K. nor Thomas DeLuca had answered texts or phone calls in 4 days. The friend used words like unusual and completely off-pattern. The dispatcher logged it, code C173. Officers were assigned non-emergency protocol. At 2:42 p.m., 2 officers arrived. They found the front gate locked, no signs of struggle or entry. The mailbox was full, trash bins untouched since pickup day. Surveillance cameras were positioned on the roofline, while motionless. Porch lights off in broad daylight. They knocked. No response. Rang the doorbell. Waited. Protocol allowed for an interior check if there was visual evidence of concern. One officer noticed condensation inside the window pane, irregular given the summer heat. Another checked a side-sliding door. It was unlocked. At 2:57 p.m., they entered. Inside the house, the temperature was cooler than expected. Air conditioning was still running. The home was silent. No music, no movement, no signs of anyone home. They moved room by room. The dining area, untouched. Living room, pristine. Kitchen counters, clean. In the back hallway near the kitchen, one officer reported a strong odor, consistent with early-stage decomposition. They followed it toward a closed pantry door. Inside, they found the body of Robin K. Face down, partially curled, visible trauma to the back of the head. No visible blood spatter on the exterior pantry wall. Officer noted that the door was closed, not ajar. No sign of defensive injuries. They secured the scene and called it in. While awaiting backup, the second officer continued to sweep. He found Thomas DeLuca's body in the primary bathroom approximately 20 feet down the hall. DeLuca was slumped near the shower, knees forward, upper body collapsed against the bathtub. Head trauma. Blood pooled at the base of the wall. No signs of a struggle. A towel still hung over the sink, unused. 2 bodies. No forced entry. No signs of theft. Both homeowners dead inside their own house for an estimated 3 to 4 days. Initial impressions were unclear. Murder-suicide, home invasion, silent execution. Crime scene control was established by 3:34 p.m. Homicide Division was called in, along with forensic services. The medical examiner's team arrived at 4:17 p.m. Entry logs were updated to restrict access to only authorized personnel with badge verification. Robin K., 70 years old, a well-known music supervisor who had worked with American Idol, Lip Sync Battle, The Singing Bee, and multiple Miss Universe broadcasts. Thomas DeLuca, also 70, a musician and songwriter, having released Street Rock in 2022. No known criminal background, no pending lawsuits, financials were stable. The couple had lived in that home since 2003. According to neighbors, they were reclusive, polite, and private. No reports of domestic disputes, strange visitors, or recent renovations. The property had security cameras, but no active alarm trip had been logged. Detectives took note of the home's layout, only one viable entrance without a camera, the sliding door near the back patio. It had no visible tampering. There were no smudges, no pry marks. The lock, manual, and left unlocked. Inside, there were no broken items, no open drawers, jewelry left in plain sight. No electronics taken. The couple's phones and wallets were found on the entry table, keys untouched, vehicles parked in the garage. The bodies, however, told a different story. By 6:40 p.m., the medical examiner issued preliminary field notes. Robin K. Likely time of death between late morning and early afternoon on July 10th. Gunshot wound to the back of the head. No signs of struggle or restraint. Thomas DeLuca. Time of death consistent with Robin. Gunshot wound to right parietal skull. No exit wound. Body position indicated possible surprise or ambush. Neither body showed signs of movement post-mortem. No smears, no drag marks, which meant whoever did this left them exactly where they died. A firearm was not recovered at the scene. The forensic unit conducted a 3D laser scan of the interior. Blood spatter analysis matched close-range impact. No GSR, gunshot residue, was found on either victim's hands, ruling out suicide. Latent print testing was initiated on all door handles, light switches, and cabinet surfaces. Shoe impressions were noted near the kitchen island, mismatched to the homeowner's known shoes. All surveillance feeds were collected for analysis. But the most critical detail, the pantry door. According to forensic analysis, it had been closed manually from the outside after the shooting, which implied intent to conceal, even if temporary. The theory emerging was that the killer hadn't fled in panic. He had time. On July 15th, LAPD issued a statement to local press. "We are treating this as a double homicide. There is no active threat to the neighborhood. This was not a random home invasion, but internally, the case was marked urgent." Because while this wasn't a robbery, it was a breach, a successful silent breach, right in the middle of one of LA's most secure, camera-heavy neighborhoods. July 10th, 2025, 4 days before the bodies were discovered. At 8:36 a.m., LAPD's non-emergency line received a call flagged under suspicious activity. The homeowner, later confirmed to be Robin K., reported movement detected by her exterior surveillance camera. A male subject was seen walking along the fence line at the rear of the property. He appeared alone, no vehicle visible, no entry had been made, but K's voice on the call was clear. He was just standing there, watching. A patrol unit was dispatched. Officers arrived at Grimes' place by 9:12 a.m. The property gate was shut. The driveway showed no unfamiliar vehicles. Officers noted the residence appeared secure from the front. No broken locks or damage. The call record notes: possible trespasser, no signs of entry. Perimeter check clear. No exigent signs, no contact with RP. RP, reporting party. By 9:34 a.m., the call was cleared and marked Code 4, no further assistance needed. That was the last police contact with Robin K. before her death. The failure wasn't procedural. Based on department policy, officers are not required to enter a residence unless there are overt signs of emergency, visible damage, signs of distress, or clear consent. Robin K. had not answered the door. No audible alarms were triggered. No windows were broken. The responding officers had followed protocol, but protocol left 2 people inside that house, unprotected. The LAPD internal audit would later confirm the subject captured on Robin's camera had not been matched to any known trespassers in the area at that time. There was no follow-up patrol, no entry record. The responding officers filed no supplemental report. This detail became critical once the crime scene was discovered on July 14th. Forensic analysts conducted a digital timeline reconstruction based on the home's internal security logs. The camera feed Robin referenced, a motion-activated exterior lens on the rear south-facing corner, had captured a figure at 8:31 a.m. That file was preserved and time-stamped. The figure stood for approximately 22 seconds at the fence line. No tools were visible. His hands were in his pockets. Then he moved out of frame. The camera did not detect any additional movement for the remainder of the day. However, the internal hallway camera, positioned just inside the back entrance, had one registered movement later that morning, precisely at 10:17 a.m. This clip, while brief, showed the back door sliding open, and what appeared to be a human shadow cast across the kitchen tiles. No face, no identifying features. The image lasted 3.4 seconds. Then the footage went black. The internal camera system had not been tampered with, but the storage drive was manually shut off. Technicians confirmed the system was switched off by someone using the in-home control panel, a touchscreen mounted near the guest bedroom hallway. The command log placed that manual shutdown at 10:19 a.m. At that moment, Robin K. and Thomas DeLuca were still alive. Post-mortem analysis confirmed the time of death to be between 10:30 a.m. and 12:15 p.m. The intruder had spent time inside the house, undetected, for at least 10 minutes, likely longer. No neighbors reported hearing gunshots. No delivery drivers came by. There were no scheduled appointments. The home was quiet, isolated, and vulnerable. Investigators reviewed LAPD's dispatch audio from July 10th. The call taker's tone was neutral. Robin's voice was calm but measured, not frantic, not panicked. The report summary stated caller advised male was standing along rear fence, no entry, no attempt, Caller did not request forced entry. Officers observed no active threat. There was no indication of violence. Not then, not yet. But by the time the 911 call came 4 days later, it was too late to act on what she'd seen. Detective First Class Marcus Tolland reviewed the timeline with quiet concern. In his words, everything about the data lined up too easily. That's what worried me. It looked clean, but real violence never is. The chain of events fit, but it fit after the fact. Without blood, without panic, without noise. Only timestamps and silence. The kind of silence no alarm could pick up. As part of standard review, a neighborhood canvass was initiated. Between July 15th and 16th, officers interviewed 14 residents within a 2-block radius. None reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the morning of July 10th. One neighbor recalled a delivery vehicle at approximately 11 a.m., but could not confirm if it had stopped at the K residence. Doorbell footage from surrounding homes showed minimal traffic. One camera caught a blurry figure moving along the edge of the K property at 8:32 a.m., consistent with Robin's report. But again, no direct footage of the individual entering the house. That was the first anomaly. They had footage of him outside. Then nothing. Then the system shut off. It wasn't just a gap. It was an edit. Controlled, intentional, and quiet. On July 17th, LAPD issued an internal memo updating the classification of the K DeLuca homicides. The incident was no longer considered a random act. The suspect had accessed the property in daylight. No property was stolen. Entry was clean. Exit path undetected. The crime, by all physical metrics, had been precise. Inside the Encino home, just off the kitchen, officers found a piano. It wasn't decorative. The lid was up, the bench used often. Sheet music rested on a small wooden stand, handwritten notes visible in blue ink. The piece on top was partially marked. Notations for tempo and emphasis. Robin K's handwriting. It was the only thing in the house that felt personal. The rest of the property was organized, efficient, almost sterile. But this corner held use. It was where she worked, quietly, professionally, and out of frame. Robin K was 70 years old. Most of the public had never seen her face, but behind the scenes in the world of live television, she was a known name. For nearly 2 decades, she had worked as a music supervisor for American Idol. Before that, she consulted for live competition shows like The Singing Bee, Miss USA, and Lip Sync Battle. Producers called her meticulous. Crew members called her predictable in the best way possible. She didn't chase recognition. She made sure things worked. Cue sheets, licensing, arrangements. Nothing aired without her checking it twice. She wasn't flashy and she wasn't visible. But her phone was always answered, and her file naming system was exact. Thomas DeLuca was also 70, a soft-spoken musician, mostly independent. He had released Street Rock in 2022, a self-produced album recorded in a studio in North Hollywood. According to music distribution records, the album had earned under $3,000 in royalties. He wasn't doing it for the money. Friends described him as calm, humble, and always willing to give feedback to younger musicians. He didn't tour. He mostly stayed home. He wrote music in the evenings. The last file on his studio laptop was saved on July 8, 2025. The name of the file was Stay Quiet, altmix3.wave. The Victimology review, standard procedure in all homicides, found no active lawsuits, no disgruntled clients, no insurance disputes, no recent threats, no business entanglements, no former employees with bad blood. Their financial records, accessed with subpoena, showed consistent retirement withdrawals and royalty income. Mortgage was paid off. Property taxes filed on time. No flagged transactions. They had no children. No known enemies. No criminal associates. No pending disputes. Detectives dug further into patterns. The housekeeper had last come on July 6th. The landscaper had visited on July 8th. The mail carrier reported routine delivery. Nothing held, nothing returned. Robin had emailed a colleague about an upcoming Idol segment on July 9th. Her tone was professional, standard. There was no lead-in to violence, no spiral, no warning. The only relevant activity outside their norm? Robin had reached out to a private home security firm based in Santa Monica to discuss upgrading their surveillance system. An inquiry email dated July 7th read, "We'd like to talk options about full perimeter recording and remote access. We're seeing more foot traffic near our block lately." The consultation was scheduled, but had not yet occurred. According to investigators, the couple's lifestyle showed strong pattern discipline. Robin began her day around 7:15 a.m. She checked email first, then typically prepared coffee and reviewed music notes. Thomas rose slightly later, around 8:00 a.m., and often went for a short walk before working in his home studio. They rarely had guests. No recent travel, no medical alerts or mental health flags. Everything in their lives was stable, and that was the concern. Because the cleaner the pattern, the easier it is to spot the anomaly. Forensic examiners conducted a full search of their devices. Robin's tablet had no unfamiliar logins. Her iPhone was located on a charging stand by the bed. It had not been used after 9:43 a.m. on July 10th. The last sent message was to a coworker, confirming edits to a file titled Top 24 Acoustic Slate Fixes. The recipient described it as routine. Thomas's laptop, located in the back studio, was closed but powered on. System logs show it entered standby at 10:04 a.m. and was not accessed afterward. The file Stay Quiet, Alt Mix 3, was last opened at 9:51 a.m. Both timelines aligned with the forensic window established in Chapter 2. By 10:19 a.m., someone was inside their home. By midday, both were dead. There were no journals, no suicide notes, no deleted messages, a digital silence between the last morning emails and the moment the system went offline, no outgoing calls, no recorded screams, no triggered alarms, just two people living a quiet life, killed in a clean space during the safest hours of daylight. Some investigators speculated on motive, though at this stage, there was no evidence to support any particular theory. It was not financial. It was not retaliatory. No personal vendetta had surfaced. If it was random, it was efficient. If it was targeted, the reason wasn't on paper. Detective Tolland remarked in his case memo, "The most unsettling aspect of their profile is that it gives us nothing to work with. No friction, no escalation, no traceable threat. It's like the suspect dropped into their lives from nowhere and left no footprint." Encino, California, July 15th, 2025. The home was sealed. Evidence had been tagged, bodies removed, and digital logs preserved. Now it was time to scan outward, beyond the property lines. Every square foot of footage from the surrounding neighborhood was pulled for forensic review. Detectives started with the obvious: motion-activated doorbell cameras, security feeds from neighbors, and any municipal traffic footage from the block between 7:00 a.m. and 1:00 p.m. on July 10th. By 10:00 a.m. that morning, the street had been quiet. No maintenance crews, no package deliveries, no landscapers. Only one pedestrian was captured during the time window, and he didn't use the front gate. At 8:32 a.m., a neighboring home's side camera recorded a blurry figure scaling the outer wall at the rear of the K property. Still frame analysis showed an adult male, approximate height between 5'11" and 6'1". Hoodie pulled over the head, gloved hands, no bag, no tools. His movement was deliberate, not rushed. The angle didn't show a face, but it captured gait, limb length, posture. All it needed was a match. The LAPD Digital Forensics Division submitted the frame to the Cal ID system and concurrently to the FBI's Next Generation Identification database. Within 24 hours, both returned a match with 87% facial geometry probability. Raymond Budarian, age 22. Residence less than half a mile from the crime scene. In 2024, Budarian had been detained by Glendale PD on suspicion of weapons possession, multiple knives found in a backpack near a public park. The case had been dismissed after psychological evaluation found him mentally unstable but not actively dangerous. Charges were dropped. No convictions on record. There had been no further police contact, until now. A review of Budarian's current address revealed that he lived with a relative in a small, single-story home with no criminal history tied to the household. He had no vehicle registered under his name. Financial data showed no income. His phone was registered under a low-cost prepaid plan. Cell tower metadata placed his device within the Encino grid at 10:00 a.m. on July 10th, directly overlapping with the timeline of Robin and Thomas's deaths. What turned heads wasn't just the match. It was what the suspect didn't do. No purchases, no contact with anyone, no travel, no attempt to sell, flee, or conceal. He returned home and stayed there. Detectives initiated quiet surveillance on Budarian's residence. 2 days of passive monitoring, no visitors, no exits beyond late-night walks around the block. The suspect showed no signs of knowing he was being watched. What stood out to detectives was the proximity, less than a mile. Walking distance. If the killer had chosen the house for a reason, it wasn't visible on record. He hadn't worked for them, he wasn't related. There were no shared schools, employers, or clinics, not even a shared gym membership. But now, with facial geometry, location data, and the timeline aligned, the suspect's name could no longer stay off record. Inside the digital crimes lab, they built a movement profile. On July 9th, Budarian's phone connected to a cell tower closest to Grimes' place between 8:04 and 9:46 a.m. On July 10th, his device remained dark, powered off or in airplane mode, between 9:10 and 12:42 p.m. That alone wasn't proof, but in context, it broke his pattern. At 8:34 a.m., his outline appears in the neighbor's camera. At 10:17 a.m., the K-Home's internal motion sensor registers activity. At 10:19 a.m., the in-house camera system is manually disabled. At 12:45 p.m., his phone reconnects to the grid. Detectives met to review whether probable cause had been met. Under California law, facial recognition is not independently sufficient for an arrest, but in conjunction with digital device mapping, proximity, and video, a warrant could be filed. A judge approved a search warrant for Budarian's residence and any devices inside. They weren't ready to make the arrest, not yet, but they had enough to go in. The warrant was served on July 16th at 5:42 a.m. July 16th, 2025, just after dawn. The warrant team moved in at 5:42 a.m. Unmarked vehicles rolled to a silent stop outside a one-story residence on Hesby Street, roughly 6 blocks east of the crime scene. The house was modest, peeling beige paint, rusted gate, a cracked concrete path leading to the front door. From the street, it looked like every other rental property on the block. But inside, detectives believed they'd find the missing pieces to a double homicide that, so far, had left behind no clear motive, no witness, and no weapon. LAPD served the search warrant without resistance. The suspect, Raymond Budarian, was present. He was taken into custody for questioning. No incident occurred during the entry. He did not ask why he was being detained. He did not speak. Once the house was cleared, the forensics team began its work. The interior was sparse. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room with stained carpet, a kitchen with no recent groceries. There was no television, no signs of visitors, a mattress on the floor, no bed frame, no family photos. The only artwork on the wall was a cut-up newspaper clipping taped above a small desk. It had no visible relevance to the victims. On the floor near the mattress, officers recovered a dark gray zip-up hoodie, the same type seen in security footage from July 10th. In the closet, a pair of black jeans, loosely folded, with light brown smudges along the cuff. They were collected for trace analysis. A pair of size 11 running shoes was also found, white with a red stripe on the heel. Partial mud staining on the sole matched early shoe print impressions collected near the sliding back door of the victim's home. In a corner of the room, investigators located a nylon duffel bag. Inside, a roll of duct tape, a black beanie, a folding knife, and a Glock 17 semi-automatic pistol, 9mm. It was immediately processed and secured. The serial number had not been defaced. A preliminary trace confirmed it had been purchased legally in Nevada in 2023, then reported stolen from a parked vehicle in Los Angeles County in January 2025. The original owner had filed a police report, but no follow-up investigation had been initiated. Ballistic testing on the Glock began that afternoon. The lab requested expedited comparison with the shell casings and ballistic profiles recovered from the crime scene. In the bathroom sink cabinet, crime scene techs found a pair of latex gloves and a single-use white packet labeled isopropyl alcohol, 70%. In the kitchen trash bin, the opened wrapper from the wipe. The timestamp on the trash pickup app showed the bin had not been emptied since July 6th. Swabs from the wipe wrapper and gloves were submitted for DNA analysis. Preliminary results returned the next day, trace material consistent with Robin K's genetic profile found on the inside fingertips of one glove. That was the forensic link. The suspect's bedroom also contained a single black flip phone, no SIM card inserted, but intact. Powering it on revealed a basic menu system. No call history, no saved contacts. But there were 8 photos in the device gallery. 6 were blurry, taken at odd angles, but the final 2 clearly showed the K property, one from a distance near the fence line, another from a close position looking up at the second-floor window. No metadata was attached, but the lighting and shadows in the image were consistent with a morning timestamp. Investigators considered whether the photos had been taken during a prior surveillance attempt or on the morning of the murders. In total, over 40 items were collected from the residence and submitted to the evidence lab. This included all articles of clothing, the firearm, the phone, the shoes, and 6 handwritten notes recovered from inside a spiral notebook tucked between a stack of old mail. The notes were cryptic, not addressed to anyone. Phrases like watch patterns, back door, glass, don't go before 9, and stay flat, no shadow. Some sentences were crossed out, others were underlined twice. None of the notes mentioned Robin K. or Thomas DeLuca by name, but their meaning was being interpreted by forensic linguistics analysts as pre-operational planning, not after-the-fact reflection. Back at headquarters, Detective Tolland reviewed the inventory logs. The Glock, if confirmed to be the murder weapon, would close the ballistic link. The gloves had already returned physical DNA contact. The phone placed the suspect at the scene beforehand. The shoes provided tread pattern consistency, and the handwritten notes, while circumstantial, demonstrated organized preparation. The pieces were no longer floating, they were aligning. But here's what made this different: the absence of escalation. Most first-time killers leave chaos, emotion, overkill, panic. This crime scene had none of that. And the suspect's room, void of personal history, community ties, or even signs of normal life, raised more questions than it answered. Detectives weren't just investigating the murder now. They were trying to understand the origin point of someone who left no trail, then showed up at a targeted home during daylight, executed 2 people, and disappeared. Tolland noted privately in his post-operation report, the space was clean, but the intent was practiced. By July 17, 2025, the urgency surrounding the Ramsay case had escalated. The arrest of Raymond Boudreaux the day prior had shifted the entire investigation from speculation to scrutiny. There were no confessions, no remorse, no public statements, just a cold, blank stare behind the plexiglass of the Miami-Dade holding facility. Investigators now had one goal: translate suspicion into prosecutable fact. The forensic timeline narrowed within hours of the search warrant execution. Evidence collection from Boudreaux's studio apartment had yielded 8 critical exhibits: a black ski mask, a Glock 43 handgun registered to no one, nitrile gloves with trace red-brown residue, a damp towel, bloodied shoelaces, 2 burner phones, and 1 torn fragment of a woman's driver's license. Each item was sealed, cataloged, and immediately sent for lab analysis. But it was the gloves that triggered a seismic shift. At 10:23 a.m., on the morning of July 17th, FDLE Forensic Biology Section confirmed the presence of high-confidence human epithelial and blood DNA on the inner cuff and fingertips of the nitrile gloves. Cross-referencing it with the medical database profile of Chanel Ramsay, the missing 43-year-old victim, produced a full match, 99.999% accuracy. The gloves had been worn after the crime. Ramsay's DNA was found both beneath the latex surface and on the outside, consistent with contact after blood exposure. Within 20 minutes of the confirmation, the crime scene lab team reanalyzed the Glock 43 pistol. There were 2 critical prints, one partial on the polymer grip and one full latent on the inside slide. Neither matched Chanel. The full print, however, matched Boudreaux's right index finger. Notably, residue analysis on the barrel and muzzle revealed blowback blood particles, again, a match to Chanel Ramsay. The bullet found embedded in her frontal skull plate during autopsy matched the rifling marks on the recovered weapon. Ballistics report: conclusive, no warning shot, no hesitation wound. This was a direct, close-range execution. And then came the video. At 1:42 p.m., the cyber forensics team unlocked one of the burner phones using pattern behavior analysis from Boudreaux's main device. Stored within a deleted folder, partially overwritten but reconstructed through metadata, was a 17-second silent video. The angle showed the bottom half of a freezer, a pale, unmoving foot, a timestamp. July 14, 2025, one day before the family reported Chanel missing. The discovery wasn't just damning, it was devastating. Digital examiners found that the phone had been turned off hours after the video was taken, never powered on again until it was seized. A post-mortem time-of-death estimate now had corroborating support. Chanel had likely been killed on the evening of July 13th. The homicide had occurred 48 to 72 hours before law enforcement made physical contact with the suspect. The video was never meant to be shared. It was evidence of control, of keeping the moment, of documenting the power over a life now extinguished. Back at the station, lead detective Jeffrey Tollins stood over the printed forensic summary sheet. In 10 years of homicide investigations, he had never seen such a calculated chain of concealment, followed by this careless misstep. It wasn't arrogance, it was detachment. There was no trace of Chanel's struggle on Boudreaume's hands, no defensive wounds, no scratch DNA. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated removal. The autopsy confirmed it. A single gunshot wound to the head, no signs of sexual assault, no restraint marks, but a deeply embedded contusion at the base of the neck, possibly from freezer impact, possibly from being dropped in, and all of it, silent, fast, measured. Investigators compiled the evidence into a prosecutorial package. The Florida State Attorney's Office reviewed it on emergency basis. At 6:11 p.m., July 17, 2025, formal charges were filed. First-degree murder with a firearm, abuse of a dead human body, tampering with evidence, premeditation with malice aforethought, no bond. A new court date was set for July 24th. In the meantime, the Ramsay family received private briefing from homicide detectives. It was not a moment for cameras. What they learned was unbearable, but it was also undeniable. Chanel had trusted the wrong man, and when she vanished, there were no alarms triggered, no doors broken, no trace left behind, until one glove, soaked in truth, told the story her body could not. July 18, 2025, one day after forensic confirmation. The arrest was secured, the charges were filed, and now came the stage that often breaks or reveals: interrogation. I remember walking through that hallway in downtown Miami-Dade's homicide unit, the kind where the walls don't echo, but the silence feels like a weight. This wasn't a search for answers anymore. It was confirmation of alignment between evidence and behavior. The subject, Raymond Boudreaume, 43 years old. No prior violent offenses. Arrested at his residence after his girlfriend's remains were discovered concealed in his freezer. He had requested legal counsel immediately, which limited traditional questioning. But what he didn't count on was the forensic clock working faster than his silence could buy him. At 9:05 a.m., Boudreaume was brought into interview room 3, no cuffs, monitored audio, no questioning until his attorney arrived. But under the terms of routine booking and processing, law enforcement conducted a pre-interrogation inventory. Clothing, visible injuries, demeanor, all logged. He showed no visible stress, no signs of fatigue. His hands were clean, but the booking photos revealed faint bruising on his right wrist and a thin laceration under his jaw, possibly defensive, possibly old. He claimed to have cut himself shaving. The injury timeline did not support that. What mattered most came from the psychological evaluation that followed. Miami-Dade's Behavioral Threat Assessment Unit was brought in to conduct a preliminary evaluation. The report categorized Boudreaume's affect as restricted and rehearsed. He neither asked about Chanel's well-being nor inquired about the charges. Instead, he requested a pen and legal pad. Over 4 hours, Boudreaume wrote 2 pages, neither a confession nor a denial, just fragmented notes. Disjointed references to betrayal, finances, and protecting what's mine. His attorney later blocked the notes from being used, citing attorney-client protection. But a forensic document examiner confirmed the phrasing matched speech patterns found in text messages recovered from Boudreaume's main phone. Those messages, dozens of them, spanned from June 12 to July 13, the day investigators believe Chanel was murdered. One in particular stood out: "If you cross me again, I swear you'll disappear." That line wasn't sent, it was saved as a draft. But metadata showed it was typed less than 12 hours before Chanel's last known movement on surveillance. The narrative began tightening around digital footprints. A geolocation log pulled from Boudreaume's phone placed him at a Home Depot in Doral, Florida, at 3:17 p.m. on July 13th. Surveillance confirmed the purchase: duct tape, contractor bags, a $39 lockbox, and a cooler. The receipt was still inside his apartment drawer. Dated, timed, and now matched with GPS metadata from his Google account, the defense tried early to argue that the items were common household supplies. But the prosecution didn't need to prove intent in isolation. They only had to prove intent in combination, and that's where the psychological profile played a crucial role. On July 19th, a court-approved forensic psychiatrist reviewed Boudreaume's evaluation notes. The preliminary diagnosis: narcissistic traits, high control orientation, low affective empathy, no formal disorder diagnosed, but the state didn't need one. They weren't building an insanity defense, they were building a timeline of rational planning and behavioral detachment. And then came the inconsistencies in his timeline. He claimed to have last seen Chanel on July 13th at noon, but video from his building's parking structure showed her arriving at 3:38 p.m. She was never seen exiting. A subpoenaed keycard access log showed Boudreaume using the basement elevator at 11:42 p.m. that night, well outside normal hours. He claimed he was getting something from his car, but camera footage showed no corresponding car entry. Instead, the timestamp lined up with the forensic estimate of time of death. The prosecution didn't rely on a singular moment. They didn't need a dramatic confession. They had constructed a methodical web, each thread anchored in verifiable physical data: cell tower, ping triangulation, dated receipts, surveillance footage, DNA on gloves, blood trace on the freezer gasket, bullet match to a firearm with his prints. Silence in the face of Chanel's name. What we were looking at wasn't just a murder, it was premeditation carried out with the expectation of erasure. But the gaps, digital, physical, behavioral, refused to be erased. I've seen suspects try to feign confusion. I've seen panic. But Boudreaume showed neither. What he did show was a calculated nonchalance. That, investigators concluded, was the most revealing tell of all. By July 20th, the court had ruled him mentally competent to stand trial. On July 4, 2025, Chanel Ramsay's husband was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Investigators confirmed she never left the house alive. The medical examiner ruled blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. Her body, stored in a locked freezer in their basement, told the rest. In court, he showed no emotion. No plea was entered. Bail was denied. Digital evidence, including deleted messages and flight plans, painted a clear attempt to flee. Prosecutors moved fast. The case was airtight. Chanel's funeral took place quietly. No cameras, no headlines, only the people she loved, mourning what should never have happened. Her salon page became a memorial. Clients called her a light, a safe space, a woman full of plans. She wasn't hiding. She was preparing to start over. That made her dangerous to a man who couldn't control her anymore. I've told this story not just to recount a crime, but to remind us what silence can cost. If someone controls your money, isolates you, or chips away at your self-worth, it's not love. Speak up. Reach out. Even if you think no one will listen, your life matters. No one should end up like Chanel, and no one should turn away from the warning signs. What would you have done differently if you were in her shoes, or if she were your friend? If this story touched you, leave a comment with where you're watching from or your thoughts on what more could have been done. And if you didn't connect with it, I want to hear that too. Your voice matters. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more true stories that matter.